Hello, everybody. I'm Richard Sher, and it's time once again to square off. And boy, do we have an excellent panel for you today. Let's welcome veteran talk show host Jimmy Mathis, amazing attorney Thiru Vignarajah. We welcome back to Square Off one of our veterans of the program. Great to see you, Catalina Byrd. Hello, Catalina. And of course, we're going to welcome now to Square Off one of Baltimore's really, really talented talk show hosts, Dan Joseph. Dan, how have you been? And welcome to Square Off.
Been doing great. Thank you so much for having me on.
It's our pleasure. Our pleasure. Well, this past Saturday, Baltimore Mayor Brandon Scott announced his candidacy for a second term in his City Hall office. According to a recent Goucher College Baltimore banner poll, former Mayor Sheila Dixon, who is also running for re-election, received 39% to Scott's 27%. During his official campaign kickoff, Scott touted the decline in murders and non-fatal shootings, and the mayor said, "Please, voters, give me the chance to finish the job." Dan, we're going to hear from you first. Kick it off. Reaction.
Sure. Look, I think that this poll is bad news for Brandon Scott, but it's hard to poll mayoral races. In general, he's got one thing really going for him, which is the murder rate, the drop in the murder rate. That's important. He's going to try to campaign on that. But then on the other side, he has this horrible spike in juvenile crime, particularly in carjackings and car thefts. I don't know exactly how he balances those two things out. The other thing is he's running against somebody who's obviously experienced as mayor, and people may want to go back to those days when we had less of a crime problem, whether Sheila Dixon was responsible for it or not. So I'm looking for this race to get much, much closer over the next few months. And I think there's still a good chance that Brandon Scott pulls it out.
Catalina, let's hear from you.
I think that Brandon absolutely wins, and anybody that remembers when I spend more time on air than I do now, polls don't vote, and they're very often wrong. And to what Dan said, it's really not just a spike in juvenile violence here in Baltimore City, it's a national thing. And so what he has done in terms of the crime that we were used to is something that is extraordinary. Also, we keep seeing Sheila run and she keeps losing. And I don't know why she just won't retire and mentor, because wisdom has a value. You don't always have to be the candidate.
Thank you, Catalina. God, it's good to hear your voice again. Jimmy.
I agree. I very rarely put too much emphasis in polls either. They're a snapshot in time. But the mayor cannot run right now on how well crime is doing in Baltimore City. And the juvenile crime and the car thefts are a major issue. My car was stolen 2 days ago. So I'm living through that right now. It's not just the shootings, guys. If you live in the city, it's quality of life issues. It's cars being broken into, it's carjackings, packages being stolen off of your porch, city services. And is the crime going down because of Brandon Scott or because of a new city state's attorney? You need to look at that. Sheila's winning by 12 right now. I think this may be her time to finally get across the finish line.
Thiru, your hand is up in your vehicle. This is a drive-in talk show.
Well, I'm not going to take any chances of my car being stolen, so I just stay here as long as I can. No, look, I actually agree with a lot of what Catalina said. I think the mayor's got a lot to be proud of. I just don't know that he's communicating it as effectively as he needs to. This drop in homicides, which is something that he campaigned on, something that he and I and others talked about as the top priority in Baltimore, for you to succeed in getting that critical and stubborn number down and not be doing better in the polls, I think has a lot to do with a communication challenge. And over the course of the next 6 months, he'll have a chance to really clarify that record. I think, I hate to say it, the best thing he's got going for him in one respect is that it's Sheila Dixon running against him. The reason why Catherine Pugh won 8 years ago is because of people who didn't want Sheila Dixon in. The reason why Brandon Scott won 4 years ago is because of the anti-Sheila vote. And at the end of the day, there is something that is dissatisfying with having the headline in the AP be disgraced former mayor convicted of embezzlement runs again. I mean, that's the national storyline around her. And so, look, it's not a great situation when you've got other problems that are spiking on your watch just as the election is approaching. But the fact that you've done such a significant job with homicides, he ought to figure out a way to communicate that and figure out a way to take credit for it. Jamie, with all due respect, it's a little hard to believe that it has much to do with the state's attorney. There's been no fundamental change in policy. If anybody's going to take credit for it, it's the same person who gets to get blamed for it, which is the mayor.
Well, I respectfully disagree with that, Thiru. You had police that were standing down under Marilyn Mosby because they believed that doing their job had no real impact on public safety. And you have seen a change with the way police are policing the city. I don't disagree with the sentiment for the people that are against Sheila is very real. However, the supporters of Sheila Dixon is also very real. And you can't dismiss the fact that under her administration, crime did come down. And I'm just saying, is it better than it was? Yes. And should Brandon Scott get credit for that? Yes. Is he messaging it well, to your point? Absolutely not. But you can't live in a city that is dealing with the public safety issues that Baltimore is and tout that as a win. I don't see how you message that effectively.
Look, I gotta say two things really quickly. And Jimmy, I'm not gonna sit here and defend Brandon. I think he is an honorable mayor. I think there's a lot that he should be proud of. I'm not going to sit here and overall defend his record, but I am going to say two things. One, if you believe that the change in policy from the state's attorney's office is what is changing the crime, you would expect some commensurate change in some other number. Arrests are not up, convictions are not up, sentences are not up. The exact same numbers that you saw before last year are here this year. And if you expected anything to change, it would be the number of car thefts or the kinds of things where maybe people are responding to increased policing, but none of those numbers are up. And so I'd love to blame Marilyn Mosby for all of the problems of the last few years, but there isn't a change in that policy that reflects it. And the last thing I wanted to say about Sheila's record, people forget that Sheila was mayor for, 15 minutes and crime was going down before she got into office. Crime continued to go down after she got in office. And she was only mayor for something like 18 months between the day she got in and the day she got indicted.
All right, Dan, before we hear from you, I just wanted to mention that
Just to clarify, Sheila was mayor longer than she was indicted. She stayed mayor up until the day that she took the Alford plea, if we're going to be historically accurate.
Thank you, Catalina, for that historical correction. Businessman Bob Wallace is also in the Democratic primary. You might remember he ran against Brandon in the 2020 election. He netted 20% of the votes as an independent. And city school teacher Wendy Bazell is also running. Dan Joseph, let's hear from you.
Yeah, well, no, I think that's an important fact. The fact that there might be more candidates than we're getting now. Right now, we're seeing this as a two-person race. But as we saw last time, there can be a lot of vote splitting, and we're not really sure who that's going to benefit. The other thing I want to mention is the corruption angle, because I think that's very important, and that's something that Brandon Scott can go out there and talk about. Obviously, Sheila Dixon has her issues with corruption. You have Mayor Pugh, who was actually in jail and had to resign in disgrace. You have Marilyn Mosby, who's constantly on the front page of the Baltimore Sun concerning her legal troubles. Brandon Scott, for all his faults, can go out there and say, you know what? I'm not corrupt. We may have all these other problems in Baltimore, but I have not succumbed to the corruption pattern that we have in this city. And I think that's a good message to bring out there.
Catalina, what do you think about that?
It's interesting that we're discussing this, as Thiru and I both ran in 2020 in the same year that Brandon won. And Brandon and I are good friends. So what Dan had just said is true, but there's also the fact that incumbency gives you a greater advantage. There were 19 people in our race in 2020, if I recall, and still the narrative was Sheila and Brandon. I don't think that a Bob Wallace, who used to be independent, who used to be Republican, and has been everything but the Green Party, really matters much. I don't think that this teacher who's not from here or any of these other people who have filed to run really matter in the grand scheme of things. Brandon has the advantage as an incumbent. He has a record to stand on. And as Dan said, he's not been tied to any corruption.
And that's a good story to tell. And he should do a better job of messaging that. You look at any election at the end of the day, I don't know about you, Dan, the other three of us have run in campaigns. It's all about voter turnout and enthusiasm. And I'm just telling you, watching Sheila with the state that the city is in right now and people that are being personally affected by it, not just with shootings. That's what the media continues to focus on is the shootings. It is quality of life issues that affect normal people living normal lives. And Sheila has a story to tell now. Look, I don't work for her campaign. I'm just telling you, as a city resident.
We haven't had 2 trash days a week since Sheila, and it's been over 15 years. We're talking quality of life. People are living intergenerationally. You create more garbage in your home when you have 3 or 4 people as opposed to 1 or 2 in your home. We haven't gone back to 2 trash days since Sheila, right? We have continuously closed firehouses since Sheila. So let's not romanticize it because of how long ago it was. And some people that are having something to say about it didn't even live here when she was actually mayor. Okay, let's keep it in context, please, because quality of life was not perfect.
I didn't say it was, but he's mayor now, right? I mean, he's the guy now. So he's the one that's accountable. He's the one running the city. So sometimes, you know, you got to defend your administration. I agree with you, okay? And I'm not romanticizing about any mayor going back to Schaefer in this town as far as, you know, when it was clean and somebody that was on top of it. And I mean, we have been just, but again, just from a messaging standpoint, you know, I think the story that he needs to tell is as Thiru said, and he's correct about this, he's got the clean record, right? I mean, whether you like the guy's politics or how he's ran the city, he has been probably the cleanest politician the city has seen in a long, long time. That needs to be his message, just not as many people are dying on the streets as they were a couple months ago.
We need to break in a moment. I do want to say the violence in the city, and as Dan brought up, juvenile crime, carjackings, vehicle thefts, armed street robberies, 2, 3 in the morning sometimes, underachieving public schools, and a police department with upwards of 400 to 500 vacancies. These are the main issues in the upcoming primary election. We're going to take a quick break. Dan and Catalina, you have not had the pleasure of listening to and seeing the voice of Squirrel, Howard Mallison.
The voice of Squirrel, Catalina. How about that?
You got a promotion, Howard.
I got a promotion. How about that? I'm sure you've seen some of the Barry Glazer TV commercials. They're different. They get your attention and they get you results. That's why Barry Glazer and his team, including an in-house doctor, make no apologies for getting every penny they can from the insurance companies. So when it comes to personal injury or medical malpractice, there's only one choice. That's Barry Glazer at 410-547-8568. And you know, there's a lot of diners in Baltimore, and the most famous of them all are the Double T diners, TT, totally terrific. You're sure to find the best breakfast, lunch, or dinner from the Double T Diner's enormous menu. There's Double T locations in Route 40 West, Perry Hall, White Marsh, Bel Air, Laurel, Annapolis, Pasadena, and the EC Diner in Ellicott City. Plus, try By the Docks in Middle River for their Monday night lobster specials. They're all in the Double T family. Back to you, Richard.
Thank you, Howard. We hope you and your family have had a wonderful Thanksgiving week and that you were able to get together with the loved ones. This year, however, except for spending time with those nearest and dearest to you, there is so much turmoil and unrest in this country, in Congress, and also in the Middle East. Many people are feeling there's not really a lot to be thankful for. What do you think about that, Thiru?
I mean, it is a very, very difficult time around the world and across our country. I know our country is as divided as it has ever been. I know the world seems as polarized as it has ever been, but there are signs of hope. I mean, the fact that after just 6 weeks, we have been able to broker what looks like a very hopeful deal in the Middle East to try to get some of those hostages back to their families on both sides. is something to celebrate. The fact that we were able to be a part of that negotiation, to be able to use the country of Qatar to be able to deliver on that. I think there are sort of signs of optimism, but yet in order to change perception, you have to change reality. And it's actually getting those hostages home that's going to make people feel hopeful. The fact that there's a commitment on paper, a ceasefire on paper, is never going to be enough.
Jump in, someone, Dan.
No, I think, look, we all live in our own worlds. And when you see negativity day in, day out, whether it's in your own backyard or halfway around the world, it eventually takes an emotional toll. But I think especially during, the holidays right now, as tough as things may be in this country, if you look at what's going on in the Middle East, what's still going on in Ukraine, we don't really know what real strife is in this country. So just to be thankful for what we do have and pray that things overseas get a little bit better, because it's hard to watch. And you look at Ukraine, we've been watching this for 2.5 years now. At some point you get desensitized by it, but it doesn't mean that's not real pain that these people are experiencing.
But it's important to note that we are very, very lucky to live in America. And that's one of the things that I'm very thankful for. We're free of war here. We don't have anybody attacking us, which makes me feel all the more sympathetic to those countries that are in turmoil right now. Yes, the economy has some problems. Yes, we're still dealing with inflation. Yes, the political situation is bad. But in certain ways, politics has just become kind of entertainment. It doesn't really, in terms of the national politics, it doesn't really affect us the way that some other countries are affected by their internal turmoil. I think it's unique to America that we are blessed to have so few issues here. And even the issues that we have a real record of overcoming them in this country, because we do come together eventually.
Catalina.
I'm going to just be nice and say I'm thankful to be back with you and Howard.
Oh, thanks.
You're all right. You're all right. Dan, I don't know you. That other guy.
Yeah, but you still love me, and you do.
We're very thankful to have you back. I know you took a little hiatus, but now you're back, and we have your brains and your charm. Thiru, what do you react to what Dan said?
Look, I think we do lose perspective sometimes. I mean, the problems and challenges we face are real and they're serious, but there's a reason why people call it first world problems. And the kinds of challenges that people around the world face are different in kind, different in scale. And I do think there's a lot of reasons to be thankful for that. But, we shouldn't be setting the bar that way either, right? I mean, we should be living in the world that we dream of, and we're trying to sort of build for our children. And so I do think Dan is right. There's a reason why people continue to flee to come to this country, that this country is the land of opportunity and the land of prosperity. And as many problems as we have, as many problems as we face, my parents, crossed an ocean to build a better life here. And that has not changed in the course of my life here. And I don't think it's going to change for decades to come.
Jimmy, come on, guys.
To what Dan was saying about how politics has kind of become just entertainment right now. I used to hate this saying, but Ron Smith back in the day had a line: if voting was that important, you wouldn't be allowed to do it. And I think that's part of the reason why sometimes people do feel so fatalistic in this country, and that it doesn't really matter what they do. Catalina, you were saying you go back over the last 4 Americas. Has anything really, really changed? And that's the frustration you see in this country, where they believe that they don't have a voice, and sometimes they feel it is hopeless, and it's not the party or the candidate. It doesn't matter if anything changes politically. Well, their actual lives change, and that's where the frustration comes from. But part of being
the entertainment aspect is what is feeding the apathy. People are tired of the performative act of running for office and the performative act of being involved in town halls and having absolutely no plan on policy, not being able to speak to anything but to tear down your counterparts, but have nothing to actually stand on themselves. And that's what makes people not want to come out. I don't think it's just the run of the mill, my vote doesn't count. I think that in these last 10 to 15 years, what we've really seen is politics become not entertainment, as Dan said, because if it was entertaining, then they would get Tyler Perry first week box office numbers in the polls, but we don't. So we're not entertaining, but it's still a performative act. And that's what's feeding the apathy. And then also candidates and campaigns on both sides of both parties suck at voter mobilization. They just do a bunch of voter registration. But we can fix those things.
Yeah, let's talk about that though. I mean, I think there's a sense of existential dread here that a lot of people have about a presidential race with two very unpopular candidates, being Joe Biden, the incumbent, and Donald Trump, the challenger, most likely.
2016, Dan, I didn't want Hillary or Donald.
Well, right. And that raises the question, why can't we get better candidates? Why can't we get candidates that the vast majority of the American people want to choose from? And I think you have to answer the primary process is broken.
Majority of Americans agreeing on anything. But
Well,
you can't.
It's college experience for an individual to go to run for office. Okay, and there are two people in the panel that have been through that. You put your family through hell. You usually have to put out your own money in the beginning. You take vicious personal attacks. You have to normally give up a position in life to do it. So you're asking, everybody hates politicians, but you're asking an awful lot for a candidate to sacrifice to, at the local level at least, in theory, try to do better for their community.
Jimmy, and I think that has been true as a trend over the last 50 years. Our best and brightest, and frankly, this is including the fact that I ran, don't go into politics as much as they used to. There was a time when that was the noblest of professions, and it drew the most inspired and inspiring people into public office. And I mean on both sides. I mean, the Bill Clintons and Barack Obamas, as well as the John McCain's and Ronald Reagan's, right? We do not have standard bearers for our party like that. And what was telling for me, I mean, I watched the last Republican debate with some interest, and I was actually impressed as a Democrat with the 5 people that were on stage. And I realized that none of them were going to be the nominee. The fact is that the one that was the most entertaining is going to end up becoming the Republican nominee, despite the fact that there are actually 5 people that are, that were worthy of that nomination. Some I like much more than others, but I think there is something wrong with a system where the Donald Trumps end up becoming the nominees, and some of the most impressive and inspiring members, Chris Christie, Nikki Haley, are not getting any traction.
All right, guys, we're going to have to take a break. When we come back, a reminder of what passed this last Wednesday on November 22nd. Howard Mallison, please.
Yes, sir. For fine dining, special occasions, or just watching sports in their sports bars, Pappas should be your #1 choice as a restaurant. Enjoy a Pappas crab cake, or as Richard calls it. Richard, what do you call it?
Well, we call them fab cakes.
There you go.
Fabulously delicious.
And they're Oprah's favorite. They're one of the many delicious choices on the Pappas menu. They have a lot of great choices of seafood and steaks and so forth. Plus, Pappas ships their crab cakes all over the country with 4 locations, including their newest sports bar and restaurant in Bel Air. See you at Pappas. Leading Edge Auto Body and Mechanical Repair want you to know that the insurance companies cannot tell you where to take your car. Richard and his family have been taking their cars to Leading Edge for years. They work on all makes and models. They offer free pickup anywhere in the Baltimore area. Give the Leading Edge a call at 410-433-6433 or visit them at 5807 Falls Road in Mount Washington. They make your car look and run like new again. Back to you, Richard.
Leading Edge, can't beat them.
They're going to have 2 of my vehicles in 1 month. So I'm a big fan of Leading Edge.
Thank the Lord. All right. Last Wednesday was November the 22nd. November the 22nd. Well, that marked 60 years since the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. And I thought we'd end the show today with just some of your reflections of that day in that country then and our country now. And why don't we hear from Dan Joseph first? Just some thoughts.
Right, sure. And I mean, I wasn't alive, obviously, when that happened. My father was, and he talks about it quite a bit. He says that that's really the day that the world changed. That was the day that we had this situation where we did have a lot of respect for our politicians. We did have a time when there was Camelot, right? That was the story about the Kennedy family. And they were, the politicians, particularly the president, was sort of held up high. And then I think that after John F. Kennedy was shot, I think there was some pessimism that sort of crept in. A lot of the joy of the world and of the United States of America kind of came to an end. But what's interesting is the week that John F. Kennedy died, there was a little thing in Time magazine, a little blip. And you know what it was? It was the Beatles. And it said, there's this little band that's coming out of Liverpool, and they're a big hit in England, and they came across the ocean, and they came to America, and they changed things too. So, we have to understand that yes, bad things are going to happen. We have, John F. Kennedy, 9/11, these horrible things. At the same time, though, America has a tendency to overcome, and we should be thankful for it.
I have four daughters, and my oldest is 16. I think there's a handful of moments in American history that it's Kennedy, it was Martin Luther King, it was the Challenger, Pearl Harbor. For me, it was 9/11. My kids haven't lived through one of those American tragedies where at any point you knew exactly where you were on that day. And then there's a handful of them. I don't know that JFK could win as a Democrat with the messaging that he had at his inauguration on this, not what your country can do for you, what you can do for your country. And it was around a bunch of very tragic years, right? I mean, it was in matter. You had Bobby Kennedy, JFK, Martin Luther King. There was a lot of turmoil that went on in the country. But like Dan said, we were a very rigid country. We have a way to bounce back, and even when tragedy like those events that we're talking about happen, we have a way to power through it, and that's part of what makes this country so great.
Catalina, we're going to give you for last. Thiru, go ahead.
Look, I want to end on a positive note, and I am grateful for so many things with my family and my personal and professional life. There's much to be grateful for. I don't want to pretend like yesteryear was some magical time. We had profound problems in the 1950s and 1960s, and we've made a lot of progress that we should be celebrating. But I also don't want to pretend like we have, moved in a necessarily positive direction on all axes. It's not just that John F. Kennedy wouldn't be nominated. Ronald Reagan wouldn't be nominated in today's culture. I mean, the best of both of our parties would be fringe candidates in today's elections, and that's a problem. And there's a reason why I've devoted myself much more to local issues and local politics, because I have a lot less optimism for national politics than for the ability for us to get something done on the local level. But I am grateful for the fact that despite the ugliness of politics and despite the ugliness of some of these conversations at the national level, that once a week, truly, you guys are able to have a forum where people can agree and disagree and respectfully disagree, and find some common ground. It's a small solace, but it is a meaningful conversation that we can do that from time to time.
Catalina, you get the final word.
Well, I obviously wasn't alive when JFK was killed. I also agree with Dan that he probably wouldn't be elected in this party at this time, but I don't share everybody's abysmal view of where we are. Things have been hard, but they've been worse before. I think there's lots to be hopeful about and thankful for. And so much respect to JFK. I wasn't there. It made for some great songs and a couple good movies. Sorry about your brother. Everybody have a great weekend.
Catalina, it's great to have you back. Dan Joseph, welcome to the panel. You'll be back maybe tomorrow.
Can't wait.
Jimmy, thank you for supporting our sponsor, Leading Edge, Auto Body Mechanics. We appreciate it in more ways than one. Thiru, of course, we like you in your car, and from now on, I think we'd like to have you in your vehicle, your line that you're sitting in your car, so you're sure it wouldn't get stolen. That's great. One of the great lines. And we are all thankful that Square Off has hit our 40th year anniversary on air, online. We've been going at it a long time, and we want to thank all of you. We are thankful for it. Tell your friends to look in at squareoff.net, or you can find us on YouTube at Square Off with Richard Sher. Happy holidays. We'll see you next time. And once again, we square off. Goodbye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving, guys.